Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to Toastmasters Unplugged. This is the podcast where we go behind the curtains and take a peek into the real stories of the people in our district who make Toastmasters both extraordinary, both themselves and their clubs. I'm your host here this evening. My name is Nigel Smith from Birmingham Boring Speakers in Division E, Area 39. And tonight we're going to do something rather special. Now, would you believe this? This is episode 26 of Toastmasters Unplugged. And this one's entitled Mastering the Moment. And we'll be speaking with not one, not two, but three of our district speech contest winners this year. So, you know that feeling when the room goes quiet, the timer lights flicks off, and everything you've prepared, everything you've practiced, everything you are as a speaker has to show up right now in this moment. How do we do that? How do they own it? Well, we're going to find out, hopefully, this evening. And so I'm going to sit down with these guys and find out how they exactly did that. And more than that, what drives them, what with Toastmasters, and what the rest of us can learn from their specific journey. So mastering the moment, trust me, by the end of tonight, you will be knowing what that means. But before we do get into it, I just want to give a huge thanks to Olga Byrne, our series producer. As I mentioned, this is series 26. And she works tirelessly behind the scenes to put these excellent productions together. So Olga, as always, we couldn't do this with you. So right, let's continue. Let's meet our winners. So first of all, I'm going to start with our International Speech Contest winner from this year. Now, he stands out as in front of a classroom every day, shaping young minds in the most powerful way. But when a contest light shows and the audience stills, he doesn't just speak, he gives people chills. A storyteller, a coach, a collector of tales. From Northeast classrooms to conference hall stages, he'll tell you that speaking's not a skill, it's a spiritual practice. And tonight, he's here to prove it across all of these pages. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please welcome Aaron Day.
Thank you very much, Nigel. What an amazing introduction, and a nice little bit of poetry in there too.
It's more memorable that way, isn't it, Aaron? But is that my time done? Can I go now and I'll just leave it all to yourself?
Yeah, that's it. Done. Live stream over. We've peaked.
You can do that, can't we? But first and foremost, I just want to say huge congratulations. Winning the International Speech Contest at district level in District 71. That's got to be something like 1 out of 5,000 eligible Toastmasters in the district. So absolute congratulations for that amazing achievement.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and it was a very overwhelming experience because I've been lucky to enter contests through Toastmasters over the last few years since I joined during COVID in 2020. And you write speeches and you think about stories that you think are going to connect with people, and that's all you try to do. And I think in that moment when your name gets called and they say, first place goes to Aaron Day, there is certainly an element of validation to it, but it's more the fact that it's this, you become kind of one with the audience, and it's just a beautiful feeling, especially when they come up to you afterwards and want to give their stories that connect with what you've spoken about.
I can imagine that. Just before we get into the detail of everything, Aaron, just want to give a shout out for your club.
Yeah, so my club is Elvit Speakers based in Durham, and they've been extremely supportive of me and entering contests over the last few years. So I'm extremely grateful to them.
Excellent. Before we get into the mechanics and all the thought processes that go on for you to create a district winning speech, just rewind with me a little bit back to that point. I guess it's a bit like the X Factor moment, isn't it? Where they're about to announce the winner and there's that long, pregnant pause. What goes on in your mind? You've done your thing, you've delivered. Just tell us what that silence feels like before your name is announced, and what that actual feeling feels like as well.
So there's 9 speakers at district level, and they're all excellent speakers. They all have a brilliant skill set, and they've got great stories that they want to tell their audience. And so when it goes third place, second place, you just, for me personally, I just immediately go, okay, well, better luck next time. And I think the reason why I do that is because speaking is, and particularly public speaking, is such a subjective thing. What feels like a great speech to one person might be a terrible speech to another. So I just think in that moment, okay, right there, like next year. And then Paul, who was the contest chair, seemed to really enjoy eking the moment out longer and longer and longer. And then it was Aaron Day, and yeah, and it was an amazing moment. And my wife, Ashley, she was sat next to me, and I took a few seconds to sort of go, oh, what the hell's just gone on? And she went, go on then, get up there, like that. And so her who kind of said, go on, get up there, accept it. And it was a wonderful moment, and people standing up to applaud. It was yeah, incredible.
And of course, you've got a chance, haven't you, to get to British Columbia later this year in Vancouver. So just tell us briefly when those, is it a regional semi-final or something that happens above district level before you know about that?
Yeah, that's right. So you go into what's called a regional quarterfinal. So as district champion, you then go into a quarterfinal with your video recording, going in with 8, maybe 9 other district champions from all over the world. And so the video recording of my speech at the conference in Tralee now goes up against speakers from Mexico, New Zealand, India, Northwest USA. And so yeah, it's mad that your name gets thrown into the hat with all of these amazing speakers from around the world. I'll find out around about beginning of July if I've got through to the Vancouver Convention and the World Championships.
Well, good luck with that moving forward. And now I just picked up from your bio that you describe public speaking as a spiritual discipline rather than a professional skill to master. That's quite a striking distinction. Is that something that you came up with as a central idea, or can you just explain it to us a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. So I think sometimes, especially when it comes to a lot of the content around public speaking and building speeches online, so much of it is about do this one thing and you'll be 3000% a better public speaker. And it's like, how do you even begin to quantify that sort of thing? And to me, yes, I understand why some people see public speaking as this professional skill that needs to be mastered. But I think if you always look at it as some sort of barrier that you have to overcome, or some skill set that you're eventually going to become like Gandalf like at, that you're kind of missing the point of public speaking, really. Yes. When, like, for example, pastors in churches, or leaders within sort of religious communities, they don't look at public speaking as something that must be mastered. They look at it as a message, something of value that they want to give their people, their community. And that's the other side of it as well, is if you constantly think about public speaking as I and them, or it as the audience, you're always thinking about them being people that you have to win over or try and sell something to them. But instead, if you always think, okay, public speaking is a discipline that if I practice it, I'm going to be able to have real soulful connections with people around me. And that's ultimately what public speaking is about, to me anyway.
Okay. Very interesting. I'll just share a personal anecdote. I always thought before I joined Toastmasters, it was all about finding the confidence and overcoming the fear. And I just suddenly found out those both become byproducts once you just stand up and start doing it. Those things sort of start disappearing away. But I am interested, Aaron, in what you mentioned about making that connection. I'm really interested in that element of story in all of this, because it feels, I apologize, I didn't hear your district winning speech, but what do you think makes the kernel of a great speech to be able to connect, generate rapport, and ultimately underline trust with your audience from the message that you're sharing?
I think centrally, there's 2 things that I think are central to, especially with storytelling. The first is you have to have the intent to be human. You have to have that intent to be human, and you have to have an element of selective vulnerability. Yes. So, for example, that doesn't mean that you treat your audience like they're your therapist, or you start sort of trauma dumping on your audience. That's not what they're there for. But it is important that when you when you provide selective vulnerability, whether it be through a story or through an anecdote, that when it comes from a human place and you don't try and go up on stage and be some walking fortress who's like pretending to be perfect, if you show imperfection, that is a very endearing thing for your audience to connect with, because if you're giving them permission to be imperfect because you're demonstrating imperfection through your story, then it calms the room, it calms the atmosphere. So that's the first. And I think the second is you have to have that intention to serve your audience as well. It's one thing to, you've got to not look at it as an ego trip. You've got to look at it as a means by which to build something with your audience rather than just talking at them.
Excellent. Thanks. Sorry, I was just diverting away to the comments just now. I've forgotten multitasking here.
That's all right. No, you're a busy guy.
With your particular style in storytelling, Aaron, and the way that you speak and connect with your audience, what do you think is your go-to feature? Is it your stage movement? Is it your expressions, your gestures, your vocal variety? Or is it something else? What is it that's something unique about you that communicates different to most others, in a sense?
I don't believe that I do anything particularly different from a lot of other speakers. I think the main thing that I try to do is find within my life or within other people's lives relatable stories that I think can connect with audiences. But I think the key thing that I try and do as much as I can when I speak is I try to show rather than tell. And this is again, not anything new. It's been in Hollywood script writing for many, many years. But if I can show an emotion on stage rather than tell an emotion, then what I'm then doing is I'm encouraging my audience to work with me. And if audiences love to work, right, they love to feel like they are building that sense of meaning with you as a speaker. So I would say that when you come to write your speeches or you put in your prompts together, think as much as you can about how you can show something on stage rather than just telling it and giving exposition.
Great, thank you. And also, as your day job, which you mentioned earlier, you're sort of teaching A-level, is it media or math students?
A-level media, that's right.
Media students. So how, from what you do within Toastmasters, does that translate into your day job and vice versa? Do you find it's complementary? Do you find, because I'm going to come on to, I'm still going to keep on with the stories in a moment, but I just keen to understand how you sort of translate your sort of level of expertise in public speaking to both environments, and are they complementary?
Oh, very much so. I would say that I've become a better teacher because of the time that I've spent practicing public speaking. And I think the most important skill that I've learned from Toastmasters that I've then taken into my teaching is to be a better listener. When you're and allowing other voices to be a part of things. And I think as a teacher, I'm always looking to put it this way. If my students have come into my room and by the time they've left my room, they're the same people, I failed as a teacher. And it's exactly the same with speaking. If the people that come into the room that I'm going to engage with, if I've not transformed them, or if they've not become transformed people based on what's been communicated and talked about and discussed, then I've failed as a speaker. So that is immediately transferable. I have a plan for teaching where I guide my students from point A to point B. Jess Ekstrom calls it lighthouse speaking. And I think that's great. That idea that take them from point A to point B, transform them, transfigure the room, and speaking is exactly the same.
Yeah, so in a sense, you need to move them either physically and or emotionally to a different state to take action and do stuff. Yeah, excellent stuff. So just back to this thing about stories, because I learned in my Toastmasters journey that in my view at least, the true art of effective communication is best done through stories and storytelling. Have you got a particular method or style or technique in the way that you collect stories or catalogue them or remember them or relate to them? Is there a process that works for you that way?
Yeah, I think the first is to build in a little bit of a habit. It is important for me, once a week, maybe twice a week, I'll take time, I'll sit down half an hour to an hour, and I'll write about the things that have happened in my week that have happened to other people. I'll write down stories that I've been told or little anecdotes, just because you never know when those things are going to be
Yes.
really handy to as a means by which to build great impromptu conversations with people.
Yeah.
But if I'm thinking about a prepared speech, there's two things that I do. So the first is that whenever I'm sitting down to write a speech, I always write with my heart. I always think, right, what is that core central thing that I want to get across to my audience? And I just write and I write and I write and I just write with heart. And then I'll leave it for a couple of days and then I'll come back to it and I then put on a new mindset on and I think with head. And so when I think with my head, I'm thinking much more about the audience's perspective of that story. And that's the point when you then start to think about structure, gestures, nonverbal communication, vocal variety. So yeah, that's my process, as it were. I first write with heart, leave it for a couple of days, then I come in and I lead with the head.
Great, thanks for sharing. And for your championship winning speech, what was the sort of gestation period for that? Did it start with lots of thoughts and mind sort of things very early on, and then you started to go through the process you just mentioned? What was the sort of lead time before you got to, if you like, your first practice of that?
October 2024 was the first time that I delivered a very, very rough edition of that speech at my club. And it was just part of a project pathway. And my mum had been diagnosed with breast cancer in August 2024. And the speech centers around that, but it also centers around the community that suddenly enveloped her
Yes.
and without even asking. And I just remember that. And there's a particular prop that I use, which is this cushion that had been provided to her by the Berry Breast Care Cushion Group. Shout out to them. And I just thought that is so brilliant. And that's such a powerful gesture that I thought this is something I absolutely have to share with people. So raw version of the speech was October 24. And then I just tinkered away at it a little bit at a time. But in terms of its real gestation period, I probably started properly getting into it November 2025. So from that point to the contest the other week, 6 months.
So it's safe to say then that the international speech you're going to put forward for 2027 is probably bubbling around in your mind right now at some point.
Yeah, there's a couple of things in there, I would say. I do think it requires that level of preparation. You've got to treat it with a great deal of respect. There are high expectations when it comes to contest-based speaking.
Excellent. Now, I just want to take you back to Tralee now. So not at the end, but at the start. So what was the running order? What sort of number were you being called up out of the 9?
I was number 4.
Number 4. Okay, so number 3's just finished. There's that minute or so of silence while the judges are doing their ballot papers and all that sort of stuff. And then there's the point, isn't there? And just in the moment, just before your name is called, just share with the listeners what's going through your mind, how you're preparing yourself. And then when your name is called, how do you steady yourself, get to the stage, feel grounded before you actually start? What are the sort of techniques you use to sort of make sure that you've got it all in control?
So I do some breathing exercises. I will do a standard 4 count in, hold for 4, breathe out for 4. I try to sort of connect as much with my body as I can. I ground myself. So I think about things that are in touching distance. I think about things that I can hear, that I can taste. And then when the name's called, I'll never forget there's a great mentor of mine called Alfie Joey. He's a wonderful bloke. He's a stand-up comedian, compere, MC, presenter based in the Northeast. And he said, Aaron, when you go up to stage, you go quick up and then take your time getting off stage. And because the whole idea is when you go quick up on stage, it's about bringing that energy, bringing that excitement. You want to show your audience that you can't wait. You're desperate to get up there because you can't wait to work with them and be with them. And then you take your sweet time getting off stage, and that's it. That's what I do.
It clearly work for you as well. So thank you so much for this segment, Aaron. We'll come back to you a little bit later when we get all the winners on together. I just want to thank you so much for sharing some really good counsel, some good tips, tools, techniques, and your own way of what you do so successfully. But thanks for being a great guest to this point. And what I'd like to do now is move on to our evaluation and table topics contest winner. Now, most people come to a district contest to win it, but this guy came to win both of them. Evaluation done, table topics done. A double winner on the day, cool under fire, kind of speaker who makes everyone raise their bar higher. Thinks on his feet, he listens, he sees, he wins when it's scripted and when it's a breeze. 2 trophies one day, that is no accident. Ladies and gentlemen, serial District 71 contest finalist, please let's welcome James McGinty. James, hi.
Hi, thank you very much indeed, Nigel. Keep that.
How you doing?
Going. It's going well.
Excellent. I forgot this with Aaron, but please do give a shout out for your club before we start.
Yeah, so I'm up in Scotland at Division S, and I'm a member of 2 different clubs. One in Area 60, which is Glasgow Central Toastmasters, and then one in Area 33, which is Linlithgow Toastmasters, and that's who I was representing in the competitions.
Excellent, thank you for that. And the one thing that always strikes me, James, I've met you on a few occasions out and about. You've always got very colourful shirts on, and you must have a massive collection of all these things. Is that part of brand James?
It sort of is. I was persuaded many years ago to try my hand at stand-up comedy, and I was terrified. It was actually filmed by the BBC for Red Nose Day, Comic Relief.
Wow.
Audience of 600 in a theatre. I was terrified. And at that time, I was very much in a shirt and tie job. And I thought, buy a fancy shirt and hide behind it. So I did that, and I liked it. And it just grew. And now, when I open my wardrobe, light comes out of it from my shirts. I'm a bit low-key today. Yeah.
You said you normally have to walk around with a pair of sunglasses before you open your wardrobe at all, because they're amazingly bright colours.
Yeah. I spend way too much money on shirts. I spend about 40 quid a month on shirts.
But why not? It makes you instantly memorable. Now, I have to say, James, as you can tell from my tagline, I live in Worcestershire. And I only live in a sort of very small cottage, but I thought, actually, I was thinking about buying your trophy cabinet from Toastmasters because of all of the amazing amount of trophies that you've got over the years. I think you mentioned in the green room earlier, you received your first one back in 2008. Do you know how many trophies you've won at Toastmasters speech contests over all those years?
No idea. I've won 9 district finals.
Wow.
But prior to that, divisions, areas, I honestly have no idea. It's not about keeping score. It's just about doing better time after time after time. And I do have a trophy cabinet. Sorry, I have 2 trophy cabinets because one of them filled up. I know that sounds really big-headed, but it's actually true.
No, absolutely not. Because I, as I said, I've followed and monitored your progress over the years. I know you've done some amazing things. I actually think it's into the 3 figures with everything that you've won from my sort of mental calculations. But what I'd like to understand and to share with our listeners is, where does that relentless drive, enthusiasm, and more than that, where do all the ideas come from to do all these speeches?
I have a very, very active brain. I genuinely think it's more active than most people's. It's not any cleverer than most people's, but my brain doesn't stop. I have no idea why. I sleep on average 5 hours a night. I am just constantly in thinking mode, and I have been all my life. I suspect there's something wrong with my brain. It shouldn't be like that. I never really have a moment of stillness. But it's not like a mental illness. It's not that I have repetitive thoughts or strange thoughts or anything. My brain just, it makes connections because my synapses are just firing constantly. And I investigate all sorts of things. I know a little about a huge amount of things. And I'm a trainer to trade. And I train people to use lots of different software packages and things like that. So I'm a lifelong learner. And if I'm not learning a new course, I'll go off and investigate something else and learn a little about it, because my brain just really wants to soak stuff up. And I think that's why I'm so good at topics, because my brain makes random connections between things. And that means that when I get up to answer a topic, I've got a really good chance of being different. And that's what matters in topics, is being different.
Excellent. So it sounds to me like curiosity is the thing that really drives you, and it feels more of a blessing than a curse. Although, you said that, you said there's something wrong with it. I don't actually think there is, because the way you come across and the way you share is absolutely inspirational and influential. And just on that, if I were to say to you, James, training events, electrical breaker and dead rat, would that mean anything to you?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely would. I had one of the most amazing stories ever when I was manager of a training centre, and half of the training centre lost all its electricity. And I panicked and I phoned someone saying, it's an emergency, because I was a new manager and I didn't know what the process was. And I kind of overdone it. And the electrician I called, they turned up in 3 vans with about 8 electricians, and they all come storming in like amber lights flashing. It was like a low-key cop movie scene. And of course, they stormed into the building. Where's the meter company cupboard? Where's the meter cupboard? We can't find that. We can't. And they were really hyper and high, and the excitement was flowing. And I eventually found it and opened the door. And yeah, there was a fuse about that long, and it had just exploded, and stuck to the top of it was a rat's head and legs, and stuck to the bottom was a rat's bum and legs, but there was no middle of the rat left.
Oh, that's amazing. And the reason I mention that, James, is because it speaks to, I think, what I learned from you a long time ago. Because I think I learned that on a virtual event you were doing for, it was JCI Aberdeen, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I think you first instilled into me then, just being in the audience, that it's about story, but it's about being memorable, funny, and that makes a connection which actually never leaves your mind. Because every time I think of James, I think of these funny stories. And the other one was the train and the toilet. Think two subject areas that wouldn't necessarily go together, but you've got an amazing way of doing that. And I just wondered if you could let us into your mind about these wonderful ideas you get. How do you connect them? And do you connect them with humour? There's clearly a point to your story, but how does your mind work to weave in such a wonderful narrative of how your speech ends up?
Yeah. So if we take that stranger on the train, which is, I still think, my best ever humorous speech, although I only placed third with it. Boo Hiss spoke first. We'll talk about judging another day.
Excuse inquiry.
No sour grapes. But what happened was, the actual truth of that story is, I was on a train and I went to use the loo, and I checked and it said it was unlocked. I hit the button to open the door, and there was a woman sat in the toilet. She hadn't locked the door. I just walked away. That was an end of it. I walked away and I waited, and she left. I used the loo. I went back to my seat. And as I was walking back to my seat, she gave me a very sheepish smile. And that made me think, what could have happened? And that curiosity, I started to explore what might have happened in that event. And so it built from there. And then I did start saying, where's the funny in this? Because it doesn't matter whether it's an international speech or a humorous speech, you need to find the funny. Because, and I was mentioning this backstage to Olga earlier, as Ralph C. Smedley said, we learn best in moments of enjoyment. And if you can make somebody laugh, you're changing their state. And when you change someone's state, they become more receptive. And that's my goal in Toastmasters, is to make people receptive to what I'm saying, to help people to improve. And by doing so, and this is something I'm sure Aaron will say, is that we learn best when we teach. And if you aim to improve other people, you will improve in the process. And to do that, you need to change people's state. And humor is the best way to do that, because you don't want to make people sad. So
absolutely. And Toastmasters is fantastic. For any sort of event I've ever been to in Toastmasters, be it this, be it a club meeting, be it club officer training or contests or just a functionary somewhere, I always leave it in a better state than when I arrive because of everything that's happened in between. Now, I just want to go back over your track record, James, across all these number of years and 9 district final winners. I'm assuming you've won international speech at district level previously. You clearly have won table topics and evaluation. Just want to put you on the spot here a little bit. Which do you prefer out of all of those 3?
Now, that's really putting me on the spot, because I love table topics. And if I was to take that in isolation, I would say table topics, hands down, no arguments. But then I think about it, and at the weekend in Tralee, I enjoyed the evaluation contest more, because as I was giving feedback, the test speaker was sat there, a Toastmasters accredited speaker, and he's going, and I could see that he was learning from my evaluation, and that tickled my ego, because we have got ego. It's not all about ego, but we have got an ego. You don't go on a stage if you haven't got an ego. So that tickled my ego. And then I think, but humorous speaking, the ability to stand on a stage and make an audience laugh, that is something special when you've planned it. And, so I really enjoy that.
So what happens then, James? I guess let's just take it back to, I know you mentioned about humorous speech previously, which now is not on the district speech contest calendar any longer, but of course you bring humour into normal international speech, or indeed any of the others. And I've seen you in action and I've seen it work brilliantly. But what happens when you expect something and it doesn't quite happen when you think it should, or something unexpectedly happens when you're not expecting it, if that makes sense? How do you cope with that sort of anomaly of, well, that was meant to be funny, but nobody's laughing, but someone's laughing at this and it wasn't meant to be funny, sort of thing? How do you cope with all of that?
Yeah, in Portlaoise, in the, because Portlaoise with semi-finals and finals, I got through the semi-final. So I had done club, area, division. In fact, I'd done club twice, 2 different clubs. Club twice, area, division, semi-final, got to district, and I hit my first laughter point, and nobody laughed. And my genuine first thought was, what's wrong with these people? Okay, that was my first thought. My second thought was, no, this is about you. It's not about them. And all I thought at that point was, you need to strive harder for the second laugh. You need to scan the audience, look for the people who are more relaxed, and try and find where the vibe is coming from. And when I got to my second laughter point, I'd already noted the bit of the audience that I felt was most likely to laugh. And I looked at them and targeted it. And I did a kind of mini laugh without making it look too harsh. And they laughed, and it spread. Laughter's infectious. So I gave a little chuckle, but not too big a chuckle that they would feel I was forcing it. They laughed because my chuckle gave them permission to laugh. And when they laughed, everyone else laughed. And that got me back on track. But that's, I remember doing that in the moment, but I've never actually planned for something like that happening. And if somebody laughs when they're not meant to, that's just a bonus.
Okay, you can work with that much easier, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge bonus. And when I gave that speech at Division, somebody laughed at a point where I wasn't expecting it. And I used an ad lib at that point. And then I built that ad lib into later versions of the speech. And I got a laugh at that point every time. So it became expected. And it's a craft. And you just have to keep working at it. And the more you do it, the easier it gets to cope with the unexpected. At Tralee, they forgot to switch my microphone on during the topics contest. And I think I was about 40 seconds in when somebody realized it and they turned it on. And of course, the whole room went boom when the microphone suddenly came on. Because I hadn't even noticed it wasn't on. But I managed to weave that into my topic and bring it into the subject and then move on. And that's just something. I've been in Toastmasters 23 years now. And that's one of the things that Toastmasters does for you. It teaches you to cope with anything and everything.
Cool. And I'm just going to finish up with one last question now, James, and we will bring you back towards the end. But just interested in the moments when you get called up to do table topics at district level and you're going onto the stage and you get given the question. What goes through your mind? How do you think on your feet? How do you structure your thoughts between the end of the question and you saying the first word?
Yeah. So what I do, I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, but what I do is I listen to the topic and then I let my mind freewheel for just 2 or 3 seconds. I don't even try to analyze the question. I just let my mind freewheel, and then it will come up with something and I will dismiss it. And then I'll let it freewheel again. And whatever comes up next, that's where I'm going. I will never go with the first thing I think of, because that's probably what most people do. Whereas if I go with the second, or sometimes even the third thing that I think of, then that's what I'll go with, and it will hopefully be different. When I won it for the first time in Glasgow, I walked up to the stage. I had no idea what I was going to say. I didn't know what I was going to do. I hated the question. And it was about what would you do in the event of a fire? And or who would you save, or something like that. And I just went, well, me, and went to walk off the stage because I had nothing else to say. And I walked halfway across the stage and I genuinely thought, if I don't think of something now, I'm going to keep walking. And then something hit me and I turned around and went back, and I get probably the best topic I've ever given. And it's about not doing that first thing.
Yeah. So not being too spontaneous, even though you're meant to be completely spontaneous for the impromptu question. So some really great tips there. Thank you so much, James. We'll come back to you towards the end of the session. I just want to thank you for sharing some of your great advice and having some fun in the process with us this evening.
Thank you very much indeed, Nigel. Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. And next, I'd love to move on to our online contest winner. Now, he joined Toastmasters in 2018. Prior to COVID, and but it didn't stop him, so moved online. And actually this guy went on to become part of the Zoom Academy, which got us through those more difficult years when we were completely online, and again through hybrid. And he watched more contests, I guess, than more than anyone else, really. And that sort of gave him that impetus and desire to move himself forward in that direction. And he knows exactly what turns great speakers into winners. But here's the thing about our next speaker, the secret behind the grin you're going to see. His wife wins basketball trophies. His daughters win Irish dancing trophies. The house was full of silverware apart from his. So what did he have to do? Well, of course, he had to go into contest and win one. So picked up that virtual microphone and won the online contest that we saw at the winter webinar at the back end of last year. And the rest, well, we're going to hear about it now. Can we please welcome to the stage Nick Collins? Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nigel.
How you doing?
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah, you're welcome. And again, before I forget, can you give just a brief shout out for your club?
I'm a member of 2 clubs. So my in-person club is Castle Knock Toastmasters in West Dublin. and my online club is Molly Malone Advanced Toastmasters, which is, I suppose, also in Dublin. They're both in Division C.
Excellent. Excellent. And how did the trophy go down in the household when you managed to bring it back? In fact, if you got it there, you can sort of physically wave it around. And has he got prime real estate on the cabinet with all these other dancing and basketball trophies and stuff going on?
Well, there's not a lot of room, actually. As you said, my wife wins loads of basketball trophies, and my kids have loads of Irish dancing trophies. So there wasn't much room left for me. So I had to shift theirs to give mine pride of place. But it was fantastic to win it, though.
So it feels like then, Nick, you're going to have to win a few more, I guess, over the coming contest seasons to sort of get it back to a bit more equilibrium, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. But I mean, I was so happy when they announced last year that they were going to run the online speech contest, because as you said, during COVID, that's when I first started my contest runs, and so and it was doing the online speech contest this time was quite nostalgic, and I had a lot of fun and thinking back to those years. As you said, I was as a Zoom master and I had a lot of fun, lots of connections, and I spent the whole of COVID actually making new connections rather than distancing. So having to do this speech contest was very nostalgic for me, and I really enjoyed it. I was so happy.
Cool. Well, congratulations. It was a great result, and all good. And interesting, we spoke to James just a moment ago, and he was looking, when he was talking about how he speaks and the connections he makes in the audience to see the sort of the feedback. You don't always get that on online contests. I remember being on online contests in Toastmasters during COVID, and sometimes people were told to turn the cameras off, so you couldn't see anyone at all. So I guess the first question I've really got for you is, what do you think is different about online presenting to in-person presenting? And then a follow-up to that, what one thing do you think makes online presenting better, if at all there is one?
Well, I suppose that's a great question, but I suppose for me that it's got to be about the delivery. So I mean, I think before this online contest, I used to worry too much about what I'd written down. I'd be there the night before tweaking my speeches, changing words. But then in sort of November time, someone said to me, look, you want to stop doing that and really focus on delivery, because that's what's going to get you to win. And I suppose delivering online is a lot difficult, I think, than delivering in person. But because you're trying to make a connection with an audience they're probably at home, they've got distractions. Yeah. So you have to work a lot harder to keep them on your side, and you have to try and keep them focused for the entire 7 minutes, because if you lose them, then you've lost their interest, and so that's what you have to try and do. And one of the key things is trying to generate energy. And
yes,
people said to me, when I was practicing my speech, they said you need to add more energy, and I thought I was adding more energy, but when I practiced this time, I videoed myself every single time, and I watched myself back to the point of boredom. I couldn't stand looking at myself anymore. But I could see that where I thought I was adding energy, it was flat, because the video tends to flatten things. So you have to exaggerate those important moments, exaggerate the humor, exaggerate the emotional moments, and that's what I tried to do. So and of course, then you're obviously trying to use you haven't got much screen to use, as you can see here. So not only are you moving to the side, you're trying to move back, and you're trying to move into the screen just to in any way to try and keep a connection. And I suppose the other point is that obviously we use pausing a lot, don't we, in speaking? But the problem is, I saw this when I was a Zoom master, that if you pause too long, they'll think you've lost the connection, and then you'll lose their connection. So there's a fine balance between the two. And I think why is online presenting better? I think online presenting is one of those things that it comes to us all, and we all have to invest in it, because that's the way the world is going. But I mean, it has to be down to, whether it's in an online setting or an in-person setting, it has to be down to delivery. And I was really, if you remember, after the autumn, after my speech, the current world champion of public speaking, he did a keynote, and if you remember that, and he said that you can have a good speech averagely delivered, but you probably won't win. But if you have an average speech brilliantly delivered, you probably will win. And that really resonated with me. And so whenever I'm doing speeches now, it's always trying to get the delivery right, and whether that's in person or online.
That's interesting, because the next question I've got for you, I think in the bio you sent through, you actually said that the further you went in the contest, the better your speeches became. Now, was that because of what you just said, or was it because of the practice and the videoing and all those other elements that go into your process?
Yeah, well, it definitely is practice. I mean, we must, people who do these speeches must practice them hundreds and hundreds of times. But it's always the feedback you get from, I had great, my club. They had extra sort of meetings just to listen to my speeches, and the feedback I got, and even from people outside of my club, they would ring me up and have Zoom calls and say, "Listen, this is what I think you should do," and that was really, really helpful to do that. And I suppose it's a bit like, I don't know if you ever watched that program MasterChef, do you? Like,
yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. So people start at the very beginning, and they basically is cooking for their family in the kitchen, but then they get evaluated by celebrity judges, and then you get Michelin-starred chefs eat your food, and then basically you by the end of it, you're working in a Michelin-star restaurant, and you just get better. Your speech, you get better. Your food gets better, and it's the same with speaking. Your speech gets better from all the feedback, and you get better, and it's like your standard of good goes up, so the longer you stay in a contest run, I think definitely your speech and you definitely improve.
So if I was to run an analogy or a metaphor from that, then Nick, I'd say you can move from a cook to a chef as you go through the process.
Oh, to a cook to a Michelin star, yeah.
Michelin star. That resonates with me. Yeah. So rather than just basically cooking whatever you've got, you become more creative with the ingredients and do more things with it and spice it up a little bit. That sort of resonates quite well. So just going back actually to what you mentioned a couple of questions ago, where you said you purposely videoed yourself and listened to yourself for, I guess, to sort of review and critique and try and improve that way. How did you overcome that particular barrier of doing that? And the reason I say that is because when I first tried doing that, I mean, you'd never think that you look like what you look like when you're speaking, and you don't ever think you sound like what you sound like when you're speaking. But frankly, it's exactly how everybody else relates to you. So was there for you even a bump in the road that you had to overcome to actually physically watch these things or listen to yourself, or did it just come quite naturally, or did you just say, oh, actually, if I'm going to improve, I've got to do this, and I've got to go through this process and do it this particular way?
Well, I think as I started off, I definitely had that. I mean, I hate the sound of my voice when you hear it back, and I thought, oh, God, is that how people hear me, or is that what I look like when I'm speaking? And
yes.
But as you do it more and more and more, I think you get used to it. And I think and that's, if you don't like the way you come across, then you have to try and change that. And I think that's how I managed to elevate my speaking, to by looking at those defects and building on them. So but it's definitely a valuable tool. Just even if I'm doing an in-person contest, I would definitely video myself loads of times just to to see how it's working. So.
And just on, I know you mentioned, or I think in the intro I gave you, that you spent a lot of time in the Zoom room and saw quite a few contests, and that gave you the, if you like, the incentive and motivation to want to take part for yourself. What difference has being in the contest circuit made to your direction of travel, or the improvements you've made in your Toastmasters journey, would you say?
I think that once you get involved in it, it makes you want to do more. And so I have a sort of a quest now that I want to really, I don't know if when you go up and do a speech, I really want to be in a position where I have a really good message, and it's been delivered well. The audience have reacted and with action, and you leave that stage not with no regrets, not thinking I wouldn't have had it like to do anything different. It's the perfect speech, and I think my drive at the moment really is to try and be able to deliver that, if it ever exists, deliver that perfect speech. And that's what and I sort of nearly came to doing that in the district final for the online speech, but of course there was no audience, so you don't get that. Well, there was an audience, but you couldn't see them, so you didn't get the audience reaction. So, but that's definitely the drive. I'm very sort of critical of myself, and sometimes I always do come off after a speech and sort of question myself what I did and why I didn't do things, and say, why did you do that, or why didn't you do that? And so I'd love to get in a position where you actually walk off stage and you're 100% happy with that perfect speech, and you wouldn't have changed a thing. And that's really the drive that I've got at the moment.
Well, if this makes any difference or not, I know it's certainly the case for myself, Nick, but there's the speech you prepared, the speech you gave, and then the speech you wish you'd have given. And every single time, even for me, I go through all of those particular ones. But ultimately, the one you gave was good enough to become district champion. So the quality was most definitely there. And for this section of the interview with yourself, Nick, just maybe a little bit of advice if there's Toastmasters out there in the audience aren't too sure about entering contests, can you sort of give a quick couple of minute pitch on why they should do it and what it would do for them?
I think that if you getting onto a contest run, in my view, is the best accelerator of growth. And once you start, you can't fail to improve, both in your speech and in your speaking. The input you get from all the people around you, you will just become a better speaker. And aside from that, the confidence you get from doing that will help you outside of Toastmasters as well. My confidence, obviously after November, really rocketed, and I use that in other areas of my life. So, but people may be a bit wary about getting involved in contests, but you just have to start. And once you start, believe me, I promise you, you're just going to see wonders.
Excellent, and thanks so much for sharing that, Nick. Olga, if we could please, can we get Aaron and James back on just for the final segment? Hi, Aaron. Hi, James. And
Hi.
Again, I'm just to finish this off, guys. I just want to sort of wrap up all of your sage advice to our listeners out there, and I'll roughly ask the same question to each of you. And Aaron, I'll come to you first, sir, because you've been waiting the longest time. But if you had to distill everything that Toastmasters has taught to you into a single sentence or maybe two, not a tip or a technique, but something true that means something to you, what might that be?
That listening is a more important skill than speaking. You've got to have an ear for listening out for stories. You've got to have an ear for listening out for great ways in which people deliver messages and deliver ideas to you. Because if you don't do that, then you're not thinking about ways in which you can expand your own toolkit as a speaker. So you've got to be a very active and empathetic listener.
So in a sense, rather, you have to have the same amount of passion for listening as that you do for speaking, in a sense.
Definitely.
So, and I guess for the active listening piece, it's like a bit about like an 80-20 sort of Pareto type relationship, isn't it? So most of the time you're sort of taking that information in. But I have to say, just on a personal note, that the feedback, evaluation and listening part of Toastmasters was the one thing that really struck me, because I thought it was about presenting and overcoming fear, building confidence, but actually it's the feedback that actually makes you grow. So thank you so much for sharing that tip. James, same question if you want me to repeat it, or you've got a great memory. I don't know if it's about getting a bigger trophy cabinet or whatever, but
no.
Is there some wisdom you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, the thing that surprised me about Toastmasters, and it sounds like an awful soundbite that I'm just about to use, but it's absolutely true. You join to learn and you stay to teach. That really is, for me, what sums up Toastmasters. We all joined because we wanted to improve in some way. But those of us who are stalwarts, I've been there 23 years and I'm still learning, but I'm also teaching and I'm helping other people. I do mentor some people, but I'll mentor anybody for 5 minutes at a meeting. I'll offer instant feedback, instant points for improvement. But I always tell people only to take that advice on board if it sits well with them. But yeah, definitely, absolutely. We join to learn, we stay to teach.
Thanks for that, James. It feels like you come to improve yourself first. Then when you get to the standard that you're happy with, then you're able to give back to allow others to improve in that journey as well. That's really profound. Thank you. And Nick, same question to yourself.
I think it probably comes down to that quote by sort of Helen Blanchard when she says that if you get all there is to get out of Toastmasters, you'll never get out of Toastmasters. I think it's a very valuable quote because there's so much to do. And I found that during COVID when I was very club centric and then got involved in Zoom Masters, got involved in the district. There's so much to do. If you just look and find it, there's so much you can do, so much you can participate in, but you just have to do it and say yes.
Great, thanks. And we are coming to the end of what we're doing here. I'm just going to do a quick wrap up then. I actually do want to leave the last words to you guys before we pass back to Olga's outro. I just want to remind our listeners that Olga's doing some amazing work with these Toastmasters Unplugged series. And please do look out on the District 71 social sites. We've got Anthony Garvey, favourite of District 71, doing a mystery conversation, a fireside chat with a mystery high-profile guest coming in June. And we've also got our next cohort of DTMs coming to share their story and their journey to try and inspire a new level of excellence into Toastmasters across our particular district. And I do want to finish off just right now, and it might be a little bit of a similar question to what I've just asked, but I just want to contain it maybe to this hour we've spent together. And Aaron, I'll come to you first, if I may. What do you think is the most important thing you've heard or said this evening, which the audience can take away with them tonight?
Yeah, don't look at public speaking as something that you can master. It's not you're not going on a course that you get some sort of qualification at the end of it. I truly believe that public speaking is a spiritual discipline that you practice, because ultimately all you're trying to do is find ways to better connect with other people via communication. So don't look at it as a barrier to overcome. Look at it as a discipline to practice.
And be yourself in the process, I guess, as well.
Definitely. Authenticity is a key aspect of public speaking. And I stand very firm against that belief. Excellent.
Thanks for sharing that, Aaron. James?
Yeah, I think that mostly from what Aaron and Nick said tonight, it should be very apparent to people that the more you practice, the better you get. And it really is. It is that simple. You practice a speech, you give it at club, you get the feedback, you deliver again, you improve. And it is genuinely all about practice.
So practice makes permanent as opposed to perfect then, because yes. I know from my own sense I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I'm always very critical of what I do, but I know that there is no such as ultimate perfection. But I guess you're sort of all proponents of the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours to excellent type thing. Yeah, definitely. But so thanks, James, for sharing that. And finally, to yourself, Nick, is there anything you've heard or you've said or you've thought during the last hour that you think really resonates that would be of benefit to our listeners here this evening?
I just think that the listeners should just really give it a go, whether it's a contest or anything in Toastmasters or outside of life, and don't worry about if you don't have the confidence to start. Just start the thing, and the confidence will follow. And you know it's a promise. It will definitely happen. So that you just have to start.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Nick. I'm just looking in the chat here. I haven't got any questions that have come up. We do have a couple of minutes left. Is there any questions guys have got for each other, or maybe a question I haven't asked that you want to answer at all? Any final pieces of wisdom before we close out?
Not for,
James.
not,
I've got one. James, what's your writing, or Nick, what's your writing process?
My writing, I sort of say from my speech that I did in November, I actually thought of that idea back in 2020, and I didn't actually put pen to paper till 2024 and didn't deliver it till 25. And I seem to procrastinate between when I get my idea to when I put it on paper, as if I don't really want to write it down, because then it becomes real. But because I do that, I have not that many speeches, but the ones I have, hopefully they're quite good. But or hopefully anyway.
Did you want to say something, James?
No, not particularly. Okay. I was just going to step in and say something to fill the time, but I see the hour's almost up. So
yeah, we're done. And if there's one thing I'm quite religious about, I'm not really religious, not in the biblical sense, but is time management. And I do want to thank all of you for, well, first of all, winning your respective district level competitions, which is a massive achievement. So congratulations for that. Also for your time here this evening. Also thanks to Olga back in the background, the series producer, doing a wonderful job, but also to our listeners that have taken the time out, and also the guys that are going to catch up on the YouTube channel later on. So I've been Nigel Smith. I've been your host here this evening. I hope you've all enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you guys at some future conferences in UK, in Ireland, over the next coming months and years. Take care, guys. Thank you.